One of the assignments I give my students is to write a sociological discussion question. And so this can help us frame our sociological imagination. Of course, we start off by reading some Wright Mills on the sociological imagination to start to get that kind of perspective. So in the field of sociology, we do not want to talk about opinions. This is not an opinion-based course or field of study. And the only reason that we would be interested in talking about opinions is to talk about how we acquired our opinions. Maybe our opinions are framed by our family, our friends, our society, and so on. So what we want to do is to frame unbiased sociological questions that keep the framework and the perspective on sociological considerations and sociological solutions. And so, of course, one of the ways we could practice writing questions is to start with the answer and then work backwards. How would the question be framed to come up with a specific and defined issue, social problem, and focus for us sociologically? So the way that I frame sociology for my students in a nutshell is that sociology is a discipline that focuses on institutions, demographics, and power. And so those are the most significant categories that sociology examines. So we're looking at the macro level, we're looking at the institutional level of society. When we talk about these big sociological frameworks of institutions, demographics, and power, the more specific we are in listing exactly what institution, very specifically, and then which demographics, intersectionally, comparatively, and then social power and social problems. The more specific we are in defining those original categories, the more specific we can be in our question and in our answer. So another thing students do in their writing is to say these grand, since the dawn of time questions or openings to their papers. And so what we want to do is be as specific as possible. And I always encourage students to open with a newspaper story. Talk about a particular person and a dynamic story. In the next paragraph, you can define what's sociological. Put that person and their issue within a statistical framework so we can understand the magnitude of that social problem. And then go into the sociology of what's behind this individual story. We also want to be very specific to the time, the geographical place, and the social context which frames the question and the issue that we're talking about. So in class, what I try to do with my students is to practice. Let's practice writing sociological discussion questions. Let's list institutions, demographics, and power, and then intersect them randomly so we can talk about the different social issues at that particular junction between institutions, demographics, and power. Another issue students have with framing research questions, discussion questions, and their sociological papers is that the question is too broad and unanswerable. It's too abstracted. So you want to ask a question that can actually have a specific answer. So when we frame these questions, we want to point to what sociology can actually answer as a discipline and as a field. What are the issues that sociology addresses? So we're understanding and defining human behavior within a particular social context. How does that change over time? The answer should lead to some kind of policy or social solution to the problem. What can be done about this social problem? What social change can be accomplished towards this end? How can we learn from this social issue or social problem? How has this social issue changed over time? How is it different from the past context and the future context? How is this social issue useful to us today? Overall, the point of this video is I want to help students try to understand how we can think from a sociological framework, and then how we can frame sociological research questions, discussion questions, which point to sociological solutions and sociological frameworks of institutions, demographics, and power, and to be as specific as possible and point to sociological outcomes that are policy outcomes, that are social change solutions to whatever social problem we're talking about. And hopefully the overall point is to help frame our sociological imagination so that we understand what is sociological, so that we can get away from our personal opinions and talk about facts and what actually happens out in the real world, and to explain why these things happen institutionally and socially, and then of course to have some kind of policy or solutions that can be addressed within a sociological context at the institutional level.